Nintendo DS on this little $90 box? Get the f out of here. The Pawky Box. Let's get into it. I recently picked up the Pawky Box. Wait, just a minute. Is it Pawky or Pokey? Well, according to Google, and as I said before, Google said it. It can't be wrong.
Pawky.
So, Pokey it is. That's not what Google said, but okay, we'll go with that. There's 4 consoles on this device that I'm particularly excited for and interested in testing. PSP, Nintendo 64, the beloved Sega Dreamcast, and Nintendo DS. Here's the console itself in all its glory. Plastic on this is a piece of shit. This console is really light. I absolutely love this logo, but that name, man. Pawky, Pokey, Pocky. Either way, according to Google, it means having a mocking or cynical sense of humor. Wait, so they meant for this console to be a joke? On the side here, you have 2 USBs, which I believe are 2.0. You have an SD card slot. On the back here, you have a power button, DC out, HDMI out, Ethernet out, and AV out. The console itself comes in 5 different colors, and then you have not 1, but 2 really shitty controllers. The controller itself uses this 2.4 gigahertz dongle, which they just threw inside the battery compartment. There's no slot to put it in, so more than likely you're probably going to lose it. And the controllers use AAA batteries. The controller itself reminds me of the PlayStation 2 controller. As you can see, they went with the same type of split D-pad. The analog sticks feel pretty similar. The action buttons feel a whole lot better. It's a short throw on here, whereas this is a long press, and the buttons feel really cheap. I do find myself accidentally pressing other buttons. If I'm pressing down, I'll accidentally press left or right. On the PlayStation are more separated and smaller, and they're domed, I guess, where these are just flat. These buttons are rubber. Those don't bother me too much. Now, going up top and looking at the trigger and the bumper buttons, the R2 and L2, they get stuck. Doesn't even feel like it actuates. You have to press it harder for it to even click into place. Now, the Pawky Box has an M-Logic S905 CPU, a Mali 450 graphics processor, and 8 gigs of RAM. The system is running Emuelec, which is a good GUI over RetroArch. There are a ton of emulators and over 5,000 games, but you will quickly realize that the damn Chinese are up to their old tricks. There are a ton of repeats because they are including versions of games from other regions, so the game list could use a cleanup, which I'm going to be doing in another video, so don't forget to click the bell. As I said, I want to take a look at 4 main consoles because we all know that it's going to do the 8 and 16-bit consoles well. That's N64, Dreamcast, PSP, and Nintendo DS. The console does most N64 games well, such as Mario 64, which it seemed to run at a steady 30 frames per second with no issue. According to Playbuzz.com, F-Zero-X pushes the N64 to its limits, but it's the only game in this video for the N64 that ran at 60 frames per second, and it appeared pretty fluid during gameplay. Not touching any of the settings, which is what I tried to do for most of these games. I wanted to show the person who did not want to touch any settings how this thing ran out the box. Majora's Mask, one of my favorite games on the N64, which is also considered to be one of the hardware pushers on the system, ran at 20 frames per second. Now, it seemed to be pretty playable, but that seemed kind of off to me. Wave Race, another favorite N64 game of mine, and can also push the system a little, ran at 20 frames per second as well, which I just found out while writing this script that most games ran at 20 frames per second on the 64. What an idiot. Perfect Dark, another graphic, hardware-intensive game on the N64, ran at around, no, it didn't run. The game, for whatever reason, got to the title screen and froze. Now on to the Dreamcast, and the first game that caught my eye was Crazy Taxi. Unfortunately, I didn't catch the FPS counter on the video capture, which is something that you're going to find as a theme in this review, but I went back and tested it, and it fluctuated between 25 and 30 frames per second. Graphically, the game looked good and ran fluidly.
I'm blowing a little bit. Yeah, man.
You gotta pick me up!
Marvel vs. Capcom 2, a game that I pumped so many No, I'm not like everybody else. Marvel vs. Capcom wasn't a game I played too often in the arcade, although I do enjoy the game. Either way, enough with story time. It was averaging 30 frames per second. The game seemed to run pretty fluidly and was graphically sound, and there seemed to be no audio issues. Power Stone 2. Okay, now it's story time. Here's a game that I played over and over and over again on the Dreamcast when I was younger. It's kind of sickening how many times I played it, but it was averaging 30 frames per second as well. Ran pretty good. Audio was good. Always loved the concept of this game. It was very different from any other fighting game. Let me know down below, what's your favorite fighting game of all time? Always been a pretty big Sonic fan, so naturally I had to play Sonic Adventure 2. I seen a fluctuation in the FPS counter. It ran between 30 and 35 FPS, which for the Dreamcast, that's a pretty normal range. Other than that, it was an enjoyable experience. I didn't notice any sound issues or graphical issues. The Pawky Box definitely ran this game pretty well. That's not what Google said, but okay, we'll go with that. Huge Resident Evil fan, so I was very happy to see Resident Evil Code Veronica on here. I got it running on the Dreamcast emulator at a steady 30 FPS for the most part. It did dip down to 23 at times during cinematics, and when there were a ton of crap going on the screen. I didn't capture during video capture, but I did notice some graphical issues with one of the characters' faces during a cutscene. Moving on to a system I think everybody likes to see emulated, that's the PSP. The Dracula X Chronicles on the PSP seemed to run at a steady 30 FPS. Oh wow, look, I put the FPS counter on. Yay me, it's only about time. Visually, it seemed to be pretty sharp, and there were no noticeable graphic glitches, and it was pretty fun to play on the big screen. Another question that popped in my head, let me know what your favorite Castlevania game is in the comments down below. Mega Man Powered Up ran really well. That's obviously no damn mystery because it's not like Mega Man Powered Up really pushed the PSP to its limits. It ran well graphically. It was a blast to play and definitely a different take art style wise on the Mega Man series. God of War, Chains of Olympus, well, we all know how this one went, don't we? This game sometimes suffers on more powerful machines, let alone what is essentially a single board computer. For this game, I did mess with the settings a little bit. Frame skip 1, resolution set to 1x, game pushed out a few more frames per second, but still completely unplayable. Now here's something that really excited me. This little $90 box plays Nintendo DS. And it's only because, personally, I've never seen a $90 single board computer handle Nintendo DS. Maybe I'm living under a rock. Metro Prime Hunters ran really well, staying at a constant 30 frames per second with no graphical issues that I could see. The only thing that I didn't like was how it controlled Samus, but I hated how the official Nintendo DS did it as well. Thought it was pretty cool to play New Super Mario Bros. DS on the big screen. Now, couldn't figure out how to get the FPS counter to display, but it did show the speed in percentage, and it was fluctuating from 70% to 100%. There was some times when the audio stuttered though. Mario 64, which is probably the best version of the game, was running at half the speed with frame skip off, stuttering sounds, and slow frame rates. After turning frame skip to automatic, the game ran close to 100%, and at this point, it was completely playable. Wizard of Oz Beyond Yellow Brick Road ran f***ing horribly at 33%, which is a shame because I never played it and it looked interesting. I think it's safe to say this pushed the Nintendo DS to its limits and completely crushed the Pawky Box while showing its limits. The Pawky Box is a little emulation beast. Now, of course, there's other single board computers and devices out there that can handle emulation much better than the Pawky Box. But for $80, 2 controllers, and a 256 gig SD card, I think that's a pretty good value. Now, the controllers are absolute shit. And I wish you could just purchase the console without the controllers for much cheaper, but I guess you win some and you lose some. If you have any questions or feel that I left something important out in the video, why don't you keep your opinions to yourself? I'm just kidding. Leave those in the comments down below. I'm a forgetful idiot and sometimes I leave out some of the small, important tidbits of information. If you're interested in seeing me clone the SD card in here for a larger SD card and also clean up the game file system on here because there are a ton of copies of games you just don't need, go ahead and click the bell to keep informed of when that video goes live. Also, let me know down below if there's any games that I didn't showcase in this video that you'd like to see running on here. I might make a shorts video and provide a link for you in the comments down below, or if I get enough response, I will do a video dedicated to all the games that you guys want to see running on here. As for now, I'll see you in the next one. If you're interested in seeing me clean up the game, if you're interested in seeing me clean up the SD card, the game list, and blah 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 blah, what the fuck you talking about? You don't fucking know. If you're interested in seeing me clean up the game, God, what are you talking about? If you're interested in seeing me clean up the game, if you're interested in seeing me clean up the SD card because there's a ton of copies of games on the SD card that you just don't need, and also you might want a bigger SD card, so I'm going to be showing you how to clone the SD card in here and putting it on a bigger SD card, and then I'm going to keep repeating shit and I don't know what the who the hell knows what's going on. I'm going to be looking over there instead of right here because all I do is up.